If you're here as usual, I would like to see you do, just tell us where you're, just tell us in the chat, tell us where you're joining from, tell us your name, tell us where you're joining from, and what you do. You know, as usual, let us know what it is that you do so that we can go ahead and make this count. My name is Uche Aniche, as you already know. So we are going to have this month we agreed in the community that we're going to do legal November. Legal November. What are those things that are statutory, that are, you know, law, that are legal, that inhibit growth, that we are often not aware of when we start out. Um, for this month, we couldn't do this last week Friday. We couldn't start last week Friday, but we're going to do this. We're going to still be able to achieve what we hope to achieve this month. So we have a couple of guests lined up. Today's session is going to be a bit of um, it's going to be our normal usual sessions where the guests make presentation and guests make presentation. Today's session is going to be a bit of conversation, and um, my friend and brother Augustine, barrister Augustine, is going to be joining us in a short while. I'm going to just find out if let me be sure that he has not joined and I'm not aware. Okay, so Barrister Augustine, if you can hear me, we're waiting for you to join so that we can kick off the session. Okay, so just hold on. I'm dropping him a message now on the chat. So, but while that is going on, I'd like to know who and who is on the call. I'd like to know who and who is on the call. Please do let me know if you're on the call. Um, Evans, thank you. I'd like to just know who and who is on the call. I'd like to know what you think, what you're looking to achieve with this session this month. What is it with legal? What aspect of um, legal are you interested in? What do you want to know? Can you just let me know? Just let me know in the chat. Just let me know what it is. Just one. So just let me know in the chat what you are interested in. Just let me know what you're interested in. What are you struggling with right now? What are you struggling with right now? Just let me know in the chat. Let's have this conversation. Let's have a conversation. What are you struggling with at the moment? Okay? So, what aspect of legal is bothering you? Can we discuss this? Can you tell me in the chat so that we can, let's see if it's part of what we're going to cover today. So, and if you're here Please, can you do me a favor and share the link and invite other people to join the session? Can you do me that favor, share the link and invite other people to join the session? Hello. Let us take this few seconds remaining until Augustine joins us. I'm waiting. Hi, Joel. Thank you for joining. Hope, thank you for joining. Hope is interested in co-founder, the legal aspect of co-founding. You want to understand um, the legal aspect of co-founding, okay? Okay. Joel, can you tell me what it is you want to, can you tell me what it is? Can you drop in the comments and let me know what is it you want to be able to take? What are you expecting us to address today? Please, if you've joined us, can you let us know what you're expecting us to treat? What is your expectation? Thank you. Okay. Great, guys. So can we share the link now and ask people to join? While I'm waiting, by the way, Augustine has joined. So Augustine is ready to shoot. Augustine, are you ready?
Yes, I am. I am. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, how do I introduce Augustine again?
That would be strange.
Because lots of people are interested in understanding the legal aspects of co-founding.
Yeah.
Okay. Please, guys, keep it coming. I like to know what it is you're interested. So let's just have a party tonight. This is legal party now. So let's have a party. So what is it that you're interested in? Evans says, I would like to know how legal. Evans, you need to be specific. What do you mean by poor legal structuring? Um, okay, Joel wants to understand returns, VAT, and FES, as in Federal Inland Revenue Services. Okay,
That's tax, man. That's a bit. That's interesting.
I guess, Joel, what we'll do is I'm going to get someone from Federal Inland Revenue Service to join us in one of the sessions.
Yeah.
Would that be fine? So that because um, I'm not sure we'll be covering taxation today. I'm not sure we'll be covering taxation here today.
Yep.
So yeah. But in one of the sessions we can discuss. Um, so let me just give a brief rundown of the things we will cover. Right? Um, we'll, we'll cover. We'll definitely cover. Um, you know, optimal structure for a startup. Um, so we'll discuss what a structure is, and then from experience, we're going to discuss some of the things we found. Now, why we talk about these things is that let me explain a few things, right? Um, Augustine is actually, I'm not sure, I don't know if you want me to reveal this, but let me, I mean, you eventually find out. So let me just say that Augustine is um, is the Sean's legal person. So you're going to get to meet him at some point if you're trying to raise money.
Yeah.
Um, Augustine consults for Sean legally and has been for some of the startups that have worked with us. Um, they would testify to, you know, how much they thought they were ready for legal due diligence, because Sean will not give you money until there's been a legal due diligence, right? And
Yeah.
so a lot of people thought they were prepared until it was time for legal due diligence. Now, some of them had, okay, let me just leave it at that. I mean, so just take it that is the legal advisor to Sean, and he's the one who does most of our legal due diligence for us, right? And right now, most of the things we're going to be discussing are just going to be some of the things we found in terms of looking at the different startups, the structures, the things. Some of the issues we're discussing is actually some of the issues why Sean didn't go ahead to invest in some of the startups. I'm just giving you some ideas so you understand how this works. So Augustine, can we just dabble in? I'm not sure. Can you just introduce yourself so I don't let me not try to do that. Just go ahead and introduce yourself. I know that you're the principal partner for
Magam
um,
Lega.
Agam Lego.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a
Okay.
bit about yourself?
All right. Okay. Thanks, Uche. Okay. My name is already known. This is my 15th year as a commercial lawyer. So, but certification and all the rest. Of course, I'm a member of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria. I'm also a member of the Risk Management Association of Nigeria. I'm also a member of the Compliance Institute of Nigeria. So broad-based experience spans both legal and financial. You know, because we find out that there's a lot more connection in those two space than we always make out, right? Then in terms of advisory, we've been doing this for a while, for a long while. I could say, I think off my head, our deal sheet could be close to about 60 to 70 businesses. That's our deal sheet that we could count on for advising and all the rest. But lately, I think about a year or 2 years ago, we now realize one of the biggest loopholes that most people have had, it's how do you build your company to be able to get financing, and that has become a major transaction, and that has become something that we often get involved with. Yeah, so that's just a bit of summary of who I am. Yeah.
Nice, nice. That is 15 years of legal,
Yes,
commercial,
experience.
commercial legal experience speaking. So when he speaks, you should want to pay attention to what he says, right? We one of the things I try to do is to ensure that um, down here in the south, we're able to build capacity.
Yeah,
There are very few people like Augustine around that is actually taking interest in the startup space down south. In fact, in the whole of Nigeria, there are few of them, but
yeah,
in the whole south and southeast region, um, I'm not sure how many of them there are, but I know I can count it just a couple of them. There's just a few of them, right? So if there's just a few of them in the whole of Nigeria, let that give you an idea of how many more people there are that actually take interest in the startup space, right? So today, let's not take a lot of time because we started late today, Augustine.
Yeah,
So I'm going to start to ask you straight up. When we talk about structure, when we talk about optimum structure, optimal structure
yeah,
for a startup, what exactly are we talking about?
yeah. Okay. Thanks, Uche. I think when we talk about optimal structure, we need to come from the position of understanding that a startup and a small business is different. I think that's where we need to begin because we have all these things mixed up at times, right? So a startup, in clear definition, means, like you have always insisted upon, a startup means a business that can scale. So let's begin from that. And then we understand, therefore, that for a business to scale, there are certain factors that must be considered. So an optimal structure for a startup, therefore, will require a structure that will allow the startup to be investable. And I'm using the word investable critically. So I'll say it again. An optimal structure for a startup is a structure that allows that startup to be investable. For example, like invested. For example, like for it's an entity or an engine network like Sean to consider that startup, right? Yeah, yeah. So again, for emphasis, I could emphasize that. Therefore, when we refer to optimal structure for a startup, we are referring to a structure that enables that startup to be investable. For without, because of course, without investment of whatever form it takes, no startup can really scale. It's virtually impossible for a startup to scale without outside
Okay,
investment.
so Augustine, let's break this down. Let's break this
Okay,
down.
okay.
Let's not be technical. So, in a nutshell, what are we saying? So,
Okay, I heard that. I heard that. Okay, so let me start with what is a structure. A structure basically means organization. That's what a structure means. A structure means how do you organize your business, right? So optimal structure for a startup therefore mean how do you organize your business so that others can see your business as a business that they can bring in money to invest in so that your business can grow much more than you think. I think that's as basic as
all
I
right,
can go.
all right, all right. Let me as I let me help by asking this question. Now, when you look at a
Please.
structure,
Yeah.
exactly are you looking for? In terms of what
Oh, okay.
exactly are you looking for? Is it
Okay.
the team? Is it the experience? Is it the shareholder type? Is it the what exactly are we looking for when we're looking for structure and organization? What are we looking for?
Okay, thanks. That's a brilliant question. When we are looking at structure, we are looking at number one, we are looking at again, I think I mentioned it's how a business is organized. Then how a business is organized, we look at it from two forms. How a business is organized, how inside you say actually you be as explicit as possible. How a business is organized inside. What do I mean inside? What's the relationship inside the business? The relationship between um, the people that founded the business and their employees. The relationship between the people that contract for the business, right? How is the assets of the business protected? Remembering that we are in the information age, what is the relationship with the between the company and governmental bodies like the CAC, like FIRS, right? What is the relationship between the founders itself, between those that founded the company? What is their relationship? Who does what? What is the power? What can one do? So structure then involve two things: structure relation to the outside and structure internally. That's what structure is. So there are bits and bits. I could give you an example of an internal structure. Let me give an example of internal structure. Who owns what portion of the company? That's an internal structure. Who owns what portion? Who reports to who? how is decision taking in the company, right? How is decision taking in the company? Who owns what is the assets of the company? Who owns it? Is it a company or is it an individual? What of the employees? Who are they accountable to? How many years do they have to serve? If they develop intellectual property, who owns intellectual property? These are all structures. If, for example, the company wants to raise money, how much can they raise? Who can they raise from? Can they take a loan? Can they take equity? Can they take convertible hybrid? These are all part of structure. Yeah.
Okay, Augustine, thank you so much. I hear you say the relationship between employee and founders. I'm
Yes.
hoping that you elaborate on this a bit more. And I also hear you say relationship between the company, the founders, and the government agencies. I'm hoping also that we're going to elaborate a bit more on this thing. Then I also hear you say, who should own the IP in a business? Let me start by asking you straight up, from your experience, who
Yeah.
should own IP?
Yeah.
And when we say IP, I want to believe that the people listening to us understand what we mean by IP. But just in case we're talking about intellectual property of the business,
Yeah.
first and foremost, Augustine, what is intellectual property? What is IP? And who should
Okay.
own the IP? Is it the founder, the person whose idea it was in the first place, or who exactly, or should it be split between the co-founders? You know, and why
Yeah.
I mean, so just I like to know.
Okay. IP basically mean intellectual property. Obviously, to discuss that, we need another time. So, but let's just give an example of intellectual property. Copyright.
Exactly.
So let me just be explicit. Example: your software code is it's an intellectual property. the
Or
uh,
this,
the expression of the idea. Say, for example, we want to run a farm, and we are creating a new machinery, a new way of harvesting, of doing anything in that farm. That's also intellectual property. That can become a patent, right? The way your banner is designed, the way your company logo is designed, is an intellectual property in its own. Copyright and then trademark can also cover that. Right. Now, so even the way you design your website is also copyrightable. So I'm just being a bit basic in my definition of what intellectual property is. But the basic definition is that it is property created by the thoughts. That's what intellectual property means. Property created by the thoughts. Right. Now, this is what I found from experience. I don't want to mention names, but there was a deal we did that took us close to 6 months, and I know you were aware that Sean did that took us close to 6 months. One of the biggest problem we had was that there were no founders agreements, right? So we didn't know who owns the intellectual property of the business in a sense. So I'll give this like you asked straight for, so let me answer it. According to the law, the person that created the intellectual property owns it. That's what the law says. The person that created the intellectual property owns it. So if I and you, we founded a company, or we are about to form a company, and I created the software code or whatever form of intellectual property, I own it. So if I wake up tomorrow and decide to move, oh boy, you either pay me for that intellectual property or I take it and go. Right. Now, what is then done is that, and this is where I find it a bit interesting, most guys do not have a founders agreement. Because what is done in the founders agreement is that it is stipulated in the founders agreement that intellectual property created by any of the founders belongs to the company that they are going to incorporate. That's the basic standard. That it belongs to the company that they are going to incorporate. So when the founder
wait,
executes that agreement, yeah.
okay,
Sorry,
continue. I want to ask you something, but continue. Finish your
all
line of
right,
thought.
okay. So what is done is that in that agreement, it stated that intellectual property belongs to the company that is going to be founded, and therefore it is transferred to the company at the formation of the company. That's what's done. Another experience we had from that transaction we did was that the employees of the company that were creating intellectual property, there was no contractual agreement. There was no contractual terms in their contract of employment stating that every intellectual property they create belongs to the company. Now, if it is not written in the contract of employment that every intellectual property the employee creates belongs to the company, the law is that the employee owns that intellectual property, whether or not you pay the employee salary, whether or not
Hmm.
you pay the employee salary. So those are
So,
that's that yeah. So that's why contract of employment goes beyond. I Google a document, I you sign, I sign. That provision is therefore critical. They're one of the ways with which the company is protected. Let me just say this, even though you didn't access, is that there's something called restraint of trade. For everybody that deals with a company intellectual property, a provision is normally made in the contract of employment stating that if you leave this company, you cannot use that intellectual property, but you also cannot work for a competitor for a specific amount of years. I won't mention that here because employees could now use that. But for a specific number of years, you can be restrained from working in a similar industry, working with a competitor because you have access to the intellectual property of the company. Yes,
nice. So, um, I was going to ask you,
please.
there was a particular transaction we were doing, and
Yeah.
we were requesting for um, employee contracts, and the founder was not willing to submit that.
Yes.
Um, is it possible that the reason for asking, because it was due diligence we were doing,
Yeah.
we're trying to find out um, why whether this company is sufficiently protected
That's the
from
word.
their
Yes. Yes.
um, let me ask, what is the relationship of that to the investors? Why does that matter to investors?
Oh, a lot, a lot. Uche, you know we are in the information age. The most critical component right now of every business is the intellectual property, because that has become the edge that every business has, right? Land can be replicated. You can buy land. You can buy vehicle, but intellectual property gives you the edge. Now, what the investors want is that they want to be sure that no individual owns the major assets of the company. That's critical for every investor. They want to know because in a sense, the investors are not investing in an individual, they are investing in the company, right? So they want to be sure that the assets of the company belongs to the company. That is one way they can guarantee their returns. That is one way. Yeah.
Okay, okay, that's fine. So let me ask you, what are some of the um, you know, what are some of the examples that you've seen? What are some of, by your experience, what are
Okay.
some of the issues you've seen where this is not happening? What are some of the experiences?
Okay.
Do you have
Okay.
examples?
Yeah, I mentioned I was talking to you and I said there was a transaction that we had this back and forth and back and forth. We started in March. We just closed it, which
Mm,
you are aware of, and um, the company in a sense was a business name, right? And
mm.
that's the risk the risk exposure in a business name is terrible, right? So that doesn't fly, and so we have to deal with advise that the company become a limited liability company. Now, when the company became a liability company, they didn't have a register of their intellectual property, so we didn't even know in a sense what the assets of the company was. Right. So we had to go this back and forth trying to understand what the intellectual property was. That's a major thing. They didn't have a contract of employment. So there was no contract for employment, you know. And so we just found out that the company was too exposed to put the syndicate's money inside. And there's
Mm.
one that we are on right now, which we have not closed. And then we are having issues because the company we have a Nigerian part of the company and another part of the company. But none of the documents we have seen assigns intellectual property to any of these two entities,
Mm.
right? So of course, our due diligence report is that the network should be a bit wary until this is done, right? So the biggest deal breaker, I think this is the first transaction I'm advising caution on. The biggest deal breaker in every transaction, in every investment, majorly is who owns the assets, because the investors are investing in the assets. So it just came to my mind that the whole purpose of structure basically is to understand control and the economics. That's basically the whole idea of structure. Who controls what, right? And then how does the company make money? Those are just the basic two ideas. Once you understand those two ideas, structures become easy. I'll give you an example. If we invest and want a seat on the board, we want a seat on the board not because we don't have things to do, but because we want to know how decisions are taken and the kind of decisions that are taken. So that, in a sense, becomes control, right? Then we also invest with a particular form, which is called, we normally invest with preference shares. Preference shares mean for everybody to be paid, we need to be paid first because we are taking a major risk in that investment. So so basically, it's those two forms. So when we are thinking of structures, think of structure in the terms of control and economics. Now, if we are doing our due diligence, the two things we look at is actually control and economics. Who control what? Because most of the time, control now determines economics. Let me give you an example of that deal I was talking about that lasted for about 6, 7 months. Fantastic company, right? Fantastic company. Like it's normal here, you find one person owning 99% or 90 or 70%, meaning that person controls what happens in the business. Now that's interesting because that's too much power. But he controls what happens in the business, but he didn't control the intellectual property of the business. He didn't even know what intellectual property in the sense of the business was, right? Now, until we got that sorted, we couldn't close the deal. We couldn't close the deal. You see, I like the fact that you brought in this intellectual property thing because I think it's something everybody needs to get, as in understand. I'll give you a very, very funny example. Uche, do you know if you do a note, just a note, and say, just this discussion we are having, and you do a note and write it down and write Uche, whether or not you write Uche, do you know that that piece of note is actually protected by copyright? As simple as that is. So your business processes, those are important. Those are copyrighted material, your business processes. As simple as that sounds, your training manual for your staff. All right, this is not an intellectual property discussion, but I just felt it would be nice to have that in.
No,
Yeah, yeah.
part of it. This is legal November, so it's fine. But by the way, I also plan to, in one of the sessions, the head of intellectual property in University of Nigeria and Soccer, will be our guest. He's going to be coming in as a guest and discuss intellectual property as well. So this is the one who is
Oh,
responsible for that comes out from the UNN as it were. So I'm going to mention, I'm going to talk about the date that he's going to, one of the Fridays he's going to come. He's already accepted, but he's trying to check his calendar to come up. But so intellectual property
oh, that's
is an thing. So that's very great. So let's look at the relationship um, between the company and the founders. So let's talk about that. What is the ideal relationship between the company and the founders? We're going to talk about that with the government agencies
oh,
as well.
yeah. Okay. I think the relationship of the okay now I think the relationship of between the founders and the company, it's there are three kind of relationship the founders could have. One is ownership, right, in terms of shareholding. That's one. The second one is management in terms of being a director of the company. Then the third one is that of an employee, right? But Uche, from experience, the most founders just think that while they are acting as the CEO, that they are also that the CEO means the owner of the company, but it doesn't mean the owner of the company. The CEO is separate. Most of our deal sheets will ask that even though the founder is acting as a CEO, there must be a contract of employment between the company and the founder as a CEO, so that he can be if he doesn't deliver on the deliverables, he can be fired. So those are the three areas where every founder needs to understand. Number one, as a owner, which is a shareholder. Number two, as a director, and number three, as a an employee of the company. He may be removed from the first two roles. He may be removed as a CEO. He may also be removed as a director. There's no provision that a director must be a shareholder. That's not the law, except the company decides that. But except he sells the shares, you always remain a director. You always remain a shareholder of the company. That's the rule.
Nice. So which means that as an as a founder,
Yes.
you own shares,
Yes.
but you don't work for the business
Yes, you
and
do.
should have your responsibilities, duties and responsibilities,
Yes.
and your fiduciary responsibility to the board. The board,
Yes.
the board controls, you actually report your performance to the board for appraisal. Now, if the board
Exactly.
feels the board represents all the owners, including you. So the board
Yes.
has a responsibility to determine if you are doing well or not. Because,
Yes.
and if you're not doing well, the board has the responsibility to get someone else who can help them get to the direction that they need the company to get to in order for them to maximize returns on their investment, right?
Yes.
So, so,
Yes. Uche, and I'll
so,
let
so,
up and I'll let up something here. Okay, sorry, be done. But there's something I
yeah,
wanted to
go,
let up. You just brought it to my notice. Do you know?
go ahead.
Okay, there are two organs of the company according to law. One is called the shareholders in a general meeting, right? Then one is called the board.
Okay.
Um, and then, but decisions are taken in the shareholders meeting based on voting, which depends on the number of shares you have. So one share entitles you to one vote.
Okay.
So if you have an yeah, so if you have an inexperienced um, or a vindictive founder, and majority of the decisions goes to the members in a general meeting, you know what is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then he has about 55 or 60% of the shares. You know what is going to play.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens, and if you notice that in the transaction we did, we moved a lot of core decision making powers to the board of directors. Yeah, we
Hmm.
moved a lot of the powers to the board. And okay, I know founders are hearing this, yeah, but it's critical. We moved that to the board of directors, right? Because the board of directors, in a sense, what they are concerned about is how does this company grow. The board of directors, they are only responsible to the company. So what happens most of the time is that the article of association of the company is now shifted, certain decisions, critical decisions, and then transferred to the board of directors. I'll give you an example we had in that deal. There is a threshold which the company cannot borrow or spend without approval from the board. It's
Mm-hmm.
not about stiffening the company. No, it's not about stiffening the company. It's about the having experienced people to evaluate certain decisions that might crash the company. A shareholder doesn't need to have an experience in how in the mechanics or the business. He doesn't need to understand the business model of the company. A shareholder doesn't need to do that. But a director should be someone that have a thorough understanding of the industry, the economy, how every decision cascade and then can affect the fortune of the company. So that's something I always advise every
Let me come.
um
I
please
have
do.
questions I want to ask.
Please do.
What management, in terms of the organs of the company that you talked about
Yeah.
two, shareholders at the general meeting, you talked about the board of
Board.
directors. Where
Yeah.
does the management come in? The
Okay.
management of
The
company.
company.
Then,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Go on. Sorry.
again,
Sorry.
who regulates the board? Who supervises the board? I mean, can the board take wrong decisions?
Uh,
Because founders can be looking at this and say, um,
yeah.
why do I need to put all of this in the trust of the board? What if they take the wrong decisions or they become and they do the wrong things? Who regulates the board?
Yeah.
Is there a statutory
Okay.
um, the statutory regulation for board of directors?
Oh, okay. Yeah, thanks. But let me start with that. There's something called the Code of Corporate Governance, right? Well, it's called a code that stipulates certain conditions which the board must follow. But let me not go into detail with that. Ordinarily, even though I gave the example that certain decisions, critical decisions, are taken by the board, within the company, what can be done is that again, approval for certain decisions goes to the members in the meeting. That's the shareholders. That's that. Outside that, another control, there is a principle called fiduciary relationship between the directors who makes up the board and the company. In other words, the directors are seen as, I'll use the word trustee. So let me explain that. The directors have their power. They can only exercise that power for the benefit of the company. That's what it means by trust. If they exercise that power for personal interests, right, or in a form to destroy the company, the law stipulates that they breach trust that they have, and then the directors can become liable. So, yes, the law provides a check on the directors. That's number one. Then, number two, shareholders could actually make a report to the CAC regarding the decisions of directors if there's no provisions in the articles regarding how directors are controlled directly by the shareholders. Right. So let me just say this in summary. In summary, therefore, internally the directors can be regulated by the shareholders. Externally, the law also stipulates what the directors and the decisions they can take. Then also, in certain instances, the CAC and the court have powers over the directors. So the directors does not have absolute powers in the sense of which we are saying. They don't.
The directors do not have absolute powers in the sense in which we are saying.
Yes.
Um, Thank you. I know that Mark Zuckerberg, for instance, retains, um, for instance, is the chairman board of directors
Yeah.
and is the CEO as well.
Yes.
He was able to structure a deal that helped him to retain control,
Yes.
and it helped him to retain the control of the direction of the business, opposed
Yes.
to leaving that in hands of the board to direct, which is one of the reasons why when they wanted him to sell to Yahoo, for instance, um, he refused to sell.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it turns out
Yeah.
that his call was the right call, right? And I
Yeah.
think that this is one of
Yeah.
the reasons why a lot of people tend to, a lot of people, a lot of founders tend to want to have control over their business because they want to reduce the, um, you know, the possibility of a meddlesome board, you know, who would want to act in 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 opposition to a direction that could potentially help the business on the long run. So, at this point, I would like for us to, answer questions. Unfortunately, there are no questions right now. Guys, if you have questions, we would like to hear. But while we're waiting for the questions to come
There
in,
was one okay. There's one you mentioned about management, which you haven't answered. Yeah, you said what's the role? Where's management in all this?
yes,
Right.
I want to move, but since you remember it, you can answer that, and
Okay.
then I move to the question I want to ask.
All right. Fine. Okay. Again, that's where a misconception come in. The organ of the companies, it's the board of directors is actually the management of the company. Let's just get that out of the way. right? The board of directors is the management of the company. The administration of the company can be given to other officials, like the chief marketing, depending on how the company is organized, right? So when we use management, that's why it gets a bit confusing. When we use management, we are basically also referring to the board of directors because they are in charge of policies, but they are not in charge of the day-to-day running of the company. One of them is always in charge of the day-to-day running of the company. That's why we call them managing director.
Mm.
That's why we normally will call them managing directors, in charge of the day-to-day running. He's always, most of the time, always a member of the board. That's why you find managing director stroke CEO. But in some instances, they are now shifting managing director. They are now separating managing director from the CEO, right? But the stipulation is that the managing director, who is a
Well,
member of the
some
board, is in
companies,
charge.
especially those that have gone public, all right. Some companies eventually do not have an MD, they have a CEO and they have a director,
Yes,
right? But that's fine. So
yes,
let's let's move on. I was to ask you, um, the question I was going to ask you is one that has come up as part of the expectations for this session today. Um, what exactly is the position of the law for co-founders? And I'm sure that a lot of them want to know. I'm sure that a lot of them want to know how do they protect themselves from co-founders that are from co-founders that want to become the that will be truant, that will play truancy or become troublesome in the future. So I think those are some of the
yeah,
things that they want to know. Can you share from your
okay, that's
experience
great.
what the law says in regard?
Okay, okay. Number one, there's no provision in our laws for co-founders. We don't have a startup law, one startup law that deals with that relationship. So we get that out of the way. But the arrangement between businesses in that form is normally done with what we know as a co-founders agreement. So let me just say it off. The first step every founding team should do is to have a co-founders agreement, a founders agreement. That should be a non-negotiable. Now, what that does is that states the duties and the responsibilities of every of the co-founder. That's normally clearly expressed in that document. So everybody knows their deliverables, and then equity or shares is now split among the co-founders in accordance with their contribution to the company. That's number two. Then those shares, and you've seen a lot of that, which I've seen you with a lot of that, those shares do not automatically become the co-founder shares because of the because of the of the because of the nature of human beings. He can decide to pick up today and just say, "Uche, I'm leaving your company. I'm tired. I don't like the way you run this business. I'm out." And then he leaves. And then because he already owns a percentage of shares, he'll keep earning irrespective of what happens. So there's always a stipulation for vesting. And I've noticed that vesting is quite an interesting topic in Nigeria because everybody keeps talking about vesting, but nobody really knows how it plays out, right? Nobody really knows how it plays out. The basic thing about vesting, it's is this the place for it? Okay. The idea behind vesting is that you shouldn't partake of the benefits of the company if you didn't if you didn't contribute and stayed to ensure your contribution bear fruit in the company. That's the vesting agreement. The general idea for vesting is 4 years, and then there's normally what is called a cliff period. But I normally do not recommend a cliff period for a very simple reason, because I only feel if it's a cliff period. Say I and you, okay, we start off with business, or we are co-founders. I have 20, I have 30%, put vest for 4 years. If there's a cliff period, I work after the end of that 1 year. Parts of the 30% is already given to me, right? Now I can decide to work. I already own that 30. I already own that percentage that have been given to me. I can forfeit the rest. but I already own that percentage. So for me, I always prefer no cliff period. You want to be committed to this dream. We say it's going to take 4 years for you to acquire your shares. All right, fine. So give us 4 years. Don't give us a year. Don't give us, again, like I'm saying, I said it's my personal preference. Don't give us a year. Don't give us, we don't want, don't give us a year. If you are ready to be committed to this business, you should be able to give us 4 years since you decide that you're going to be committed to this business. So let your shares vest and become a complete vesting at the end of the 4 years. I normally, like again, I say it's a personal preference. I do not recommend a cliff period, but that's just the practice anyway. Right. Now, so then what is also done is that to protect the business, the co-founders, in part of the co-founders agreement, there's also a space for non-competes. So if the co-founder decides to leave the business, he cannot set up a business or set up a competing business for a particular period of time. Both of you will decide that. But there's a threshold the law will not allow you to impose on someone. And I said I will not disclose that here for certain reasons. Right? So those are ways that the company or a company or so can be protected from the activities of an interesting co-founder. Now, this is where it gets a bit, yeah. So this is where it gets a bit interesting. Say, for example, you and I, which will form the company. James, another person now wants to join us in, right? And we are offering him co-foundership. What do we normally do? What we normally recommend is that he signs the founders agreement also, so that he becomes bound by the terms of that co-founders agreement. Yes, that's what we recommend.
Okay. Now there's something else that okay, I was going to ask you this question, but you mentioned it, so I was going to ask you that does our law have? You said that we don't have a startup law, so
no,
we don't recognize co-founder, but we certainly have partnership laws. We have laws that deal with partnership. Because if you said, because I was going to ask you if our law recognizes vesting, because you've spoken about the fact the threshold that our law does not allow you to put some things through, which means that there are aspects of our law that recognizes um, some of these things. So I think in a nutshell, I think where we not have a startup law, we already have codes and laws in several places that when put together, create a new law to become a. We already have codes and codes in our statutes that you can pick and regulations you can pick together, and you have a basic startup law already working.
I agree. Yes.
As well.
Yes, yes, you're right.
Our obviously because this co-founding, because it recognizes partnership and to a large extent vesting. So,
yes, it does.
So which means that our law recognizes it. Now, I was going to ask you about ESOP, which is employee stock option, right? Do you know about employee stock option?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yes.
Talk about it. I want to know.
Oh, okay. Why? All right. So 2 years, sometime last year, there was an entity that wanted to work in the blockchain, and then they reached out to us to advise them on how they should structure the company in the beginning. So we discussed what their exit strategy is, which maybe one day we'll discuss that, because that's when you're forming a company, that's some of those things you need to consider. So we asked them what was their exit strategy. And they said their exit strategy is to be acquired at the end of a particular period. All right. And then in between those times, they are going to take investments, equity investments. So we then said, okay, fantastic. Let's look at your share capital. Our Nigerian law stipulates that 25% of your share capital must be given out. Let me use that colloquial language. What I mean by that is if there are three, if we register a company with 1 million shares, the law recognizes that 25% of that million shares, which is 250, must be owned by individuals. So that means we can keep 75% in reserve. So what I now did for them, what we suggested we did for them was 25% should be allocated to the founders. 10% should be reserved for employees. Of course, with the option of expanding that to become maybe 20%. Then the outstanding should be reserved for the investors that will likely be coming in, so that the shares, so that the capital structure of the company does not get over bloated, because that's always a bad signal to investors. Now, this so already the company has about 10% of its shares reserved for employees. Now, a stock option, therefore, it's look at founders' shares and the vesting provision in reserve as applied to employees, right? Uche, you are going to run Amalgam Legal for so and so period. We will pay you so and so amount. But because of your Q role, we are allocating, of course, during negotiation, if you don't ask, we won't give to you. We are allocating a percentage of our shares. You are entitled to 3 to 4% of the total assets or total shares of this company as an employee. But those shares, you will not exercise rights over those shares until a particular time or event, right? That's in a colloquial sense is what the stock option is. It is mostly used, it's used most of the time to reward critical employees. When I mean critical, I mean very important employees. In certain businesses, the software engineer might be the most critical person in that business, right? And so for most startups that do not have the funds to pay, but can sell their story very well, the employee stock options become an amazing tool that they can use in pulling in the required stuff that they want. I don't know if this is the truth, but there's this story about the guy that designed Facebook logo, and how he was paid. Um, um, I was given stock options, and how that made him 150 million. I cannot verify that, but there was a rumor about that running around, and all the rest, all the rest of that. So that's a tool that I think every startup guys can actually negotiate, can use in negotiating with the kind of staff they want to employ. Currently, we're
So
working with a
let's
software. Yeah, sorry.
go ahead, finish. Currently, you're working with a software.
Yeah, we're working with a software company. Um, the designer, I was amazed that they wanted to hire a top design person, and the person insisted that he doesn't want that if there are no stock options on the table, she won't deal. I was shocked. But you know what I found out later? I found out later that she's a German citizen. You know, I found out later that the designer was a German citizen. She was vehement about no stock option, no deal. She wasn't even negotiating salary. Salary for her was not on the table. No stock options, no deal.
Mm.
Yeah.
So it's safe to say that stock option is a tool that a lot of founders can use
Yes.
um, to recruit top level executives that can
Exactly.
help them their business.
Yes.
And that brings me to the something you talked about, exit strategy. A lot of times when people send their decks and they say, and I keep telling people, angel investors want to make returns, right?
Yeah.
They want returns. And so if you are coming up to come and tell me that um, you want money, right? And I'm looking at your team, I'm asking myself, is this team, is this team in a place to be able to do and deliver the type of business that will provide the type of return
But I
that I
want.
want,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the first question that a lot of founders I think are not answering is, what is your exit strategy?
Yeah.
Here's here's what I've learned over time. This is what I've learned over time. You see, running a startup, right,
Yeah.
is essentially, you define startup in the beginning,
Yeah.
but you know what? I have I have stated that definition,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So why a startup is a business that can scale, right?
Yeah.
But I have updated include and is structured and is going around that opportunity in a way that it can
That's
scale.
structure. Oh,
You
okay.
know, not an idea, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So what I found, a
Sorry,
lot
I'm
of
noting.
people
I'm
come,
noting
I
that
have this
definition.
idea. No, you know, people come to me and they say, I have this idea, and I want to build around it. I'm sorry, I don't listen to ideas anymore. I
Yeah.
want to listen to people that found opportunity. I want to exploit the opportunity. Do you
Yeah.
understand? So that in
I
a
do.
nutshell is what we should be pushing, right? And but you guess what? Your opportunity, the opportunity you found, you would realize that you're not sufficiently equipped to um, to, to maximize or to explore, to optimally explore that opportunity, that you will need some people to
Yeah.
join you to do that. That's where co-founders come in.
Yeah.
That's where
Yeah.
you need to be able to reach out to highly experienced people, because when you send me a deck, I'm looking at your team. I want to be able to see people that
Yeah.
have done things, like I told somebody recently, and I'm saying to them, you know what? You are running a processing company, right? And you're looking to raise big
Yeah.
money,
Yeah.
right? I want to see in your team that you have somebody who has worked in a major company somewhere, right? That
Yeah.
in a in a position where the person controls production. I want to see that type of experience in your team. I want to see
Mm.
somebody who has worked in distribution for major
Yeah.
companies. I want to see that type of person in your
Yeah.
team, right? I want to,
Yeah. Yeah.
so advisory is good. Advisory is good, but advisory will not substitute for for in-house people doing the same. Do you understand? So people would need to go out of their way to go look for people that have the experience that would help them build. And guess what? Your exit strategy is what makes you, is what defines how fast you want to
Yeah.
build. If
Yeah.
you're building to be acquired, if you're building to be acquired, then you're benchmarking with the
Ex-
possible acquirers,
exactly. Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
You want to be building possible to create value, right?
Yeah.
That will attract those identified acquirers.
Yeah.
So if you come to me and say my exit strategy is that we found an opportunity, you see company A, B, C are doing this, but we know that in the future they will need this, and they are not looking at this right now,
Now. Yeah.
and there's potential already, and so we are looking to build up this in such a way that it becomes massive value for them, and we can sell to them.
Yeah.
We want you to invest to help us achieve this. so that these guys can buy us at so and so point,
Yeah.
and so that we people can possibly buy us at so and so point, and we can make you 25x,
Yeah.
which by the way is the average amount of return an
Yeah.
angel is looking
Good. Yeah.
25,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
you know, so ESOP, tying it back to ESOP. So ESOP provides you a tool with which you can use to achieve high level teams. I mean, away from co-founders now, okay? Away from co-founders. ASOP is a tool that you can use to provide that high level, high quality team in quality team members that would help you meet your funding needs and meet your growth needs in a nutshell.
Yeah.
So let me just see if there have been questions,
Okay.
if questions on the group, but otherwise, I don't think we have questions. So,
Okay,
and I
but you
think that
just
we're
mentioned
running out
something.
of.
I think it's something you've not emphasized enough in all your interactions with the startup. The exit strategy concept. You've not emphasized that enough. So I'm going to be on your case over that. You've not emphasized that as enough as you should. As you should. Because people just seem to be building and nobody's building for a particular purpose.
Augustine, I found out something that I need to make. Maybe I should make this announcement.
Yes.
We're working on a we're working on a an education program
All right.
that is going to go on radio. We just want to take all this and break it down.
Yeah.
It's a 5 minute radio program on a daily basis that teaches grow concepts, right?
Yeah.
So it's a 5 minute startup program.
Cool.
Yeah, it's just
Cool.
5 minutes.
That works.
Hopefully, um, but I think that one of the things I've found is that a lot of our people, I'm sorry I have to say this online, I have to say this live, but the truth has to be the truth, and the truth has to be said, and I mean, it doesn't matter how much it hurts, but a lot of our people are not willing to learn, and it's it's sad, but that's the reality. And we will continue to work for, we'll continue to look for people that are willing to learn and to
Yeah.
apply learning and to be able to achieve the results and support them as much as we can, but that's essentially what it is. Okay. But
Yeah.
I'm going to do what job where we, like I said, where we are. Let's just say we are retooling. We're retooling and we are redesigning most of our communication um, system, and we're also redesigning the structure for Startup South to make it easy for things to run a lot more smoother or
All
smoothly.
right. Cool.
So don't worry, you're going to get to see that a lot more. Um, People need to begin to understand what this whole startup thing is about.
Yeah.
It's not just about a lot of it so far has been driven by hunger. People that are hungry and feel that starting a business can help them put food on the table. And so
Yeah.
because their initial motivation is food, it is difficult for them to look beyond the food,
Food. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We'll look at the food and look at the bigger picture to make things um, in order to move toward in the direction we want to move.
No, thanks.
Augustine, thank you so much. There are no questions here. I don't know. Okay. Joel says, thank you, Che. My mind has just shifted about the meaning of exit strategy.
Whoa.
Thank you, Joel. I'm happy if anyone that gets that.
Exactly what I was
My
talking
day would
about
have been,
here. Yeah.
yeah, day would have been made to you get this. But we have to learn to engage, we have to learn to interact, we have to learn, um, we have to show that we want to become better and at the things that we do. And much more than that, we have to go out of our way to get other people to join us because like I keep saying, if you're the only one that know what you know in your community, you're going to be frustrated.
Yeah.
I don't understand how I don't people say they want to become better and they are learning just for themselves,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I would think that people will go out of their way and
Totally.
co-opt their friends to come and learn what they are learning because that's the only way you can get
Yeah.
better co-founders. That's the only way to get better people because they are also sufficiently educated as you are in what it is you're trying to do. So you're going to build a better business because you have people that understand what you're doing. If only you attend the startup start program and you go back and you're struggling to explain it to the people around you. Your result is going to be very, very slow. It's going to be
So,
slow
yeah.
because you're dealing with people that don't understand what it is you're doing. Do you understand? So, I mean, it's fine. Augustine, thank you so much. I don't want to waste your time.
It's fine.
Take
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
I'm grateful to you that whenever we call you, regardless of how short notice it is, you show up. I appreciate that, and I don't want to take it for granted. Please, I like to ask you to continue to stand by us. You will get you will get a lot more details of what we're doing very soon, and we would hopefully we'll build together and see where we land
Yeah,
at
we
the
will.
end of
We
it.
will. We will.
Everyone,
Thank you. Anytime, Uche.
thank you everyone that have joined. Thank you everyone that have joined this session today. I'm hoping that you've gotten something. Please do share the videos and invite your friends for the next um, for the next session on Friday. Thank you.